Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Less Stress, More Peace and Happiness Summit. I am so happy that you've decided to join us for this summit. We've had so many great speakers and we're learning so many great techniques for dealing with stress and overwhelm. And in these days, that's so needed, is it not? So today I have a very special guest for you. I'm going to introduce you to Anthony Profeta. I'm going to tell you a little bit about him, and then we'll bring him on and let him take it from there and teach you a lot of great stuff around mindfulness and contemplative practices. So Anthony Profeta is a former medical student turned internationally known and professionally certified meditation teacher, mindfulness expert, and singing bowl specialist. His knowledge stems from over 2 decades of intensive practice, and his passion for meditation has led him around the world studying many various techniques in monasteries and meditation centers of the US, Nepal, Italy, and India. Anthony considers himself very blessed to have studied under the direct guidance and mentorship of such well-respected teachers and meditation masters as Jack Kornfield, Sharon Salzberg, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, and even the Dalai Lama. His popular Good Vibrations sound bath meditations have sold out venues throughout the nation. And in 2019, Anthony was commissioned to present this experience at the Art World's premier show, Art Basel, in Miami Beach, Florida. Anthony's based in Florida, but travels and teaches classes, workshops, trainings, and retreats throughout the world. He even leads tours and retreats, both domestically and internationally. Anthony's a regular presenter at the Edgar Cayce Association for Research and Enlightenment. He's been featured on numerous radio shows and podcasts. His writings have been published in the mindful living site, The Elephant Journal, and Thrive Global. And he's also been featured in the Huffington Post. Anthony has guided tens of thousands in meditative and contemplative practices and has also led wellness programs for such corporations as Sharp Electronics and Pandora Music. His guided meditations and sound bath meditations are available on Apple Music, Amazon Music, Pandora, and Spotify. You can follow him on social media at Anthony Profeta Meditation. So, wow, you guys, right? Please welcome with me, Anthony Profeta. Hi, Anthony.
Thank you so much, Janine. How are you? And hello to everybody listening.
Yes, I'm well. How are you today?
I'm wonderful, and I'm truly honored to be able to be here with you today and talk about this because I think your topic is needed in today's world more than ever.
Absolutely.
People are looking for peace and happiness from eternity. People have been looking for peace and happiness, but in today's world, which has become a very stressful place, it seems a hard thing to find and discover when we're trying to navigate through all the stresses of life. So, exactly. And especially with what's happened over the past couple of years around the world, I think that this is a topic that more people need to be talking about. So thank you so much.
Oh, no, thank you. And you're right. That's exactly why we're putting this summit on, because I think, I was raised by a psychiatrist. Okay. And so I was raised with something called transactional analysis, and basically like being aware of your emotions. And if there's a conflict, how to find resolution, without fighting and winning, and just kind of raised with skills for dealing with uncomfortable situations. But what I've realized, we think when we know something, we kind of feel like other people know it or should know it, and that's not the case. So I think a lot of people, especially in the last few years, it's been so difficult for so many, and just sustained fear and isolation and disconnect from purpose, disconnect from community. There's so many things going on. That this is why we're doing this. So I've collected just a great group of people. I love that you're part of it. Everyone's brought such great value to the table, and we're really going to help a lot of people. That's what it's all about, right?
Yes, absolutely.
I'm going to give you. I'm sorry.
I just want to say thank you.
Oh no, thank you. So happy you're here. I'm going to put your title up, give you center stage, and I'm going to let you take it from here. I'd love for you to tell us about your path, like your background story, what brought you to. It's interesting that you were a medical student. I actually thought about going into medicine too. But how did you end up where you are? Tell us that.
Well, my background has was one in which I always thought I was going to be helping people through a traditional role of Western medicine, becoming a medical doctor. Went to medical school in New York City to go and work on that path. However, prior to that, I was already practicing a little bit of meditation. I started my own meditation practice back in the year 2000, but it was only for my own personal spiritual journey. It was not with the intention to one day teach these practices to others. But when I was in there, I knew already prior to going in that the research by the AMA, or the American Medical Association, was showing that nearly 80% of all illness and disease was due to stress. And so I was not fully understanding why then, for the majority of cases, I was just being guided and taught to treat symptoms, because I'm not really helping the person then get to the underlying root cause. And that's changed since, and there was a new study which was published in 2021 from the National Stress or National Journal of Stress and Anxiety. One of these again psychological publications, but they stated that now nearly 90% of all doctor and hospital visits worldwide are stress related.
Wow.
And if this is, and that's a telling statistic, 90% of them. And if this is the case, then I really wanted to begin to step back and say, I want to help people get to that root cause. I want to help people learn how to navigate through this stressful world, learn how to de-stress their body, learn how to respond more wisely to what life is presenting to them, rather than just saying, okay, here, let me prescribe this pill for you to get rid of this symptom or that. And, in some cases, some of the medications today even have worse side effects than what some of the people are going in with. Now, I'm not against medication. I do know that there are many instances where it's needed, but I do believe that we're in a society where medications are overprescribed. And so I'd love to also, dial back on that a lot and show people that you can, just by maybe changing your lifestyle or adding some sort of contemplative, meditative practices into your life, you could really learn how to deal with some of the difficulties that life begins to bring your way.
Yeah.
And so I personally knew how much meditation was helping me through very stressful times in my life. I often say one of those years was first year in medical school. And so I had these practices to fall back on. So I said, well, wait a minute now. Let me look at these things, not just from a spiritual perspective, which is why I got onto the path, but I began to, at that time, begin to tune into and devour any of the research articles, the scientific journal articles that I could find on meditation and mindfulness practices. And at that time, there was maybe about 7,000, but today there's about over 10,000 published articles on mindfulness, on meditation, on contemplative prayer, which scientifically prove through replicable studies by well-known universities such as Harvard and Duke that the medical community can no longer deny the benefit of these practices. And so, there are many doctors today who are telling their patients, hey, maybe you should go check out a mindfulness class. Maybe you should look into meditation. Maybe you should, check out yoga, where that was, 50 years ago, maybe 1 in a million doctors. But today it's a lot more prevalent. And also because of people in mindfulness circles like John Kabat-Zinn, who was the head of the Mindfulness Center at Massachusetts General Hospital, and some of the teachers that I've studied with, like Jack Kornfield, who was a psychologist, and Sharon Salzberg. They've really brought these practices to the forefront of sort of like clinical integration. There's now like mindfulness-based cognitive therapy and mindfulness-based, stress reduction, and which are really meditative, contemplative practices that are being utilized to bring well-being to people's bodies, minds, and help them to deal with the stress of life, help them to deal with anxiety, help them to deal with things such as depression, and really lead them into a piece where they're feeling more relaxed, calm, and happy. And so these practices, for me, that was my journey on how I got here. And it's become my passion to share these practices with others, not because of what I heard it can do from other people, but because of what I've seen it do in my own life, from my own firsthand direct experience from practicing these methods. I've seen what it's done for me and how I move through life a little bit more differently. I mean, I can share with you a very big noticeable change for me was, now there was many along the way, but perhaps the biggest one was in the year 2020, when the whole world shut down and, people's lives were turned upside down in an instant, overnight. I was I was actually in India leading a retreat group over there when the world shut down, and I had to scramble and get people on flights. I had to get them home. We had to, and literally there were 6 of us that got out of India on the last flight out to the United States, and it was a very, very stressful time.
Yes.
But when I got back to the United States, everything that I had work-wise was gone, because everything that I was doing was in-person classes, seminars, summits that were in person, and retreats both in the US and internationally, which were in person. Yeah. And that was all pulled out from under me in the blink of an eye. Exactly. And now, even though that all changed, and now I literally had like zero income now coming in, because pretty much everything was in person, I still had bills to pay. I still have a son that I need to support, make sure he eats and has clothes and is well taken care of. I have a mother that I take care of and help. And so my whole life, even though the financial part was like dissipated, didn't mean that I wasn't still responsible for all these other things. Now, if I didn't meditate, I know very quickly I could have spiraled down into like, oh my God, what am I going to do? This is catastrophic. But because I've had years of these practices that I was working with up until this point, the thing that came to me was not, okay, oh my God, how am I going to deal with this? It was, this is what life is presenting to me now. How am I going to respond to this? Wow. And so my attitude was very different than if I truly believe if I didn't have these practices in my heart and in my soul, I wouldn't have been able to handle it in this way. And then I began to say, okay, the world is going to be very different right now. I'm going to have to deal with creating online courses. I'm going to start to have move to Zoom and other sort of things that I can do to still teach and sort of generate the, some sort of income in order to take care of my responsibilities.
Right.
And so I'm very, very grateful to these practices because they allowed me to sort of remain centered, remain content, and remain like, okay, life is always going to have its ups and downs. We don't know when these things are going to come along. One thing about life is things are unexpected sometimes. People can die and taken away from us in a blink of an eye. And as we've seen in 2020, our job can be stopped in a blink of an eye. The access to the world can be taken away from us in the blink of an eye. So rather than being just tossed around by life, know that life can have these moments of ups and downs and hills and valleys, and learn to be sort of centered and hold your contentment or happiness in riding these waves. And that can literally be done by meditative mindfulness and contemplative practices. It's not easy, and it does take time to develop that. But but these practices have shown me that if you put in the hard work, if you stay determined and you stay diligent and disciplined, that you can cultivate such a mindset and you can create a life of happiness and peace in the midst of the chaos that might be happening around you.
Right. That's a beautiful and very powerful example. And I know a lot of people can relate to it. But yeah, so with your practice though, instead of, like you said, spiraling into panic, and then, we're not making good decisions when we're coming from that place, but you were able to come, your mind shifted into okay, stay centered, and you shifted into problem solving or solution or looking at different opportunities.
Right. And how can I work with this? Right. Because what you said a moment ago, when your mind shifted, because if I spiraled down into, oh my God, this is catastrophic, what am I going to do? I would have been moving into, coming from your background, you're well aware, fight or flight, and I would have been in that whole stress response mind rather than looking at it from a more objectable mind and how am I going to respond. And fight or flight, we usually come from a place of reaction rather than responding. And that's not usually a wise way to always deal with life.
Right, exactly. And another thing, when you're in that, and I think most people are kind of unconsciously in that state anyway, right? So this, again, the point of the summit is to educate people and just show them a better way. But you know, when you're in that mindset and you're not even aware of it, you're more in, I guess, a survival mode. So when you're in survival mode, your hormones are different. You've got the cortisol and the adrenaline and all this kind of stuff. Your body isn't even able to do what it needs to do for health. So when I was listening to your story earlier, and I mean, you can see where helping the mindset with these practices also helps someone's physical body. When you were talking about, you know, learning as you were learning as a med student and in the state you were in, but looking for root causes and dealing with the root causes can help someone with their physical symptoms as well.
Absolutely. I'm a big believer in the whole mind-body connection. And I know that this is, again, something that's really coming to light in medical communities. For a while, you know, when the whole, I guess, hundreds of years ago with Newtonian physics, they began to look at the body more as like a mechanical thing. But they're learning again, which, you know, we knew in our ancient civilizations, that the mind and body are intimately connected. And the way we think can literally begin to create symptoms, illnesses, diseases within the body by the mindset. And I do have a friend who's who was in a medical school, who is a cardiologist, but he deals with heart transplants for people that need sort of, severe cases. And he always, prior to, you know, putting them on lists or anything like that, he always sits down with them and talks to them for a good deal of time to really understand how their mindset is. Because if they're in, not a very positive mindset, thinking that, oh my God, is this going to help me, or, you know, things like that. But if they really have a firm commitment that this transplant's going to be a phenomenal change for them, and they're going to move through it with ease, that they have a greater chance to be, you know, very receptive to everything going right.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if they don't have a good mindset, he tries to encourage them or help change that, or, you know, show them that there is a good way to think, because, you know, how you think will benefit in your healing, and how long maybe the healing process takes, and all of these sort of things. And I firmly believe that if we can learn that, you know, we are moving through life more in a majority of cases, you know, stressed out, fight or flight, unconscious of this fear that we're living in, that if we can learn to change this, we can begin to correct things physically in the body and emotionally within ourselves as well too, because we are getting to, like we said, the root cause of things.
Right. Yeah, that's beautiful. My father is a psychiatrist. He's practiced medicine for 60 years, and 50 of those were psychiatry. And he actually just retired a year and a half ago at the age of 86.
Wow, and, God bless. That's amazing.
Right. And didn't want to. He didn't want to retire. So loved his work. But I remember, to your point, in high school, he came home and told us a story. So this would have been in the 70s. So, you know, before all this was talked about, you know, like it is now. But he came home and told us that he had a client that presented with cancer. And she told him that her words were, "I know that I gave myself cancer."
Wow.
And at the time, I remember thinking, like, why would somebody do that? And it was just, even for him, it was kind of a light bulb moment about the power of the mind and the mindset and expectations. There's so much involved.
Right.
Yeah, but that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, and that's why the power of practices such as meditation, mindfulness, and other contemplative practices are very beneficial, because they get to the mind and they begin to transform the mindset, and they begin to transform the way we look at the world. And when we can look at the world in sort of a different perspective, or from a different, filter, we can begin to see maybe the world isn't as, maybe doom and gloom, as bad as sometimes other avenues are trying to portray it. And we can still find the happiness within the moments where, yes, maybe things aren't going perfectly great for us, but you know what? Life, like I said in the beginning, has its ups and downs. So it's not always going to stay at the bottom forever. There will be some moment when it begins to go up. And so we can always look, forward to, all right, maybe life isn't exactly how I want it, but this too shall pass, and there'll be brighter and better times ahead.
It's
And
a moment in time.
yeah, it's a moment, and a person who's living from a more mindful awareness of the way life works knows that, because some people, of course, everybody wants to be happy. They want to be peaceful, but they want that like all the time. And they think that life can be like just happy, blissed out every single day of my life. And like, that's something that's attainable, but that's not attainable, because life will have its like ups and downs, its hills and valleys. And the people that are close to you one day will be taken away from you. They'll die. Everything in this world is impermanent. The things that you get, possessions you think will make you happy, they grow old, they break down, they get taken away from you. So there is no moment where you're going to be, God willing, and you live to the average age of, I think it's maybe 78 now or something like that, that all 78 years of your life, you're going to be in a state of complete happiness and bliss. But you can learn to navigate through the low times by learning to cultivate a mindset that recognizes that is life. And it's not this where, it's blissed out all the time. And it's not this where it's going to be in the dark all the time either. People want this, but I often say that if you know the life, and if you've ever been hooked up to a heart monitor, you know that the life force or the heartbeat is this: beep, 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 beep. It always goes up and down. If life was this, you're dead. Flatline.
Right.
Life everybody's chasing. We want the flatline life, but that's not life.
It's not
life
the case.
is a series of ups and downs. And what we need to learn is on this journey, it's inescapable. We're all going to get sick. We're all going to get, people, like I said, that die. These are Eastern sort of perspectives of the movement of life, that there's unavoidable things in life that, is part of life that no one can avoid. And so we have to learn to accept those as part of life's journey, knowing that they're going to come. That doesn't mean we don't grieve. It doesn't mean we don't feel sad. Those also are human experiences. And so that's part of life too. But we know that those moments are, like you said, just a little blip in time, that they're there and that they, of course, will change. But sometimes we do get stuck.
Yes.
And what happens is mindfulness, meditative, contemplative practices can help you to get unstuck. And that's why I also believe they're very important in creating a life of less stress, less anxiety, and creating a life of more peace and happiness.
Perfect. So tell people what that looks like. What would a day look like to incorporate those practices?
Well, the number one thing is to find a method or practice that works for you. Now, some people, when they hear that I'm a meditation teacher, first word out of their mouth, or first sentence out of their mouth is, oh, I've tried that. Can't empty my mind of thoughts, or, I've tried watching my breath, but my mind is too chaotic, and all these sort of things. And they think that is it. Like, there's no other options out there for you. But the truth is that there are thousands of ways to practice. There's now, when I did go over, as you said in the introduction, I did go to live as a monk in some monasteries and ashrams of India and Nepal, trying to amass as many tools as I could. And when I went over for the very first year, I sought out specifically to find a teacher of a practice in the Hindu tradition called Kashmir Shaivism, because that tradition teaches 112 different methods of meditation.
Wow.
112 of them. Different ways to practice.
I had no idea.
I know. Some are like gazing up at what they call the third eye. Some are chanting, doing like a sound or something like that. But they have 112 different ways that you could try to meditate. Now, in the Eastern texts of the Buddhist philosophy, I lived in a couple of their monasteries as well. The Buddha taught over approximately like 40 or 50 methods of meditation.
Oh, wow.
And so right there, we have 152 different ways to practice. Now, that leaves out TM, or transcendental meditation. That leaves out all these different visualization techniques. And so someone who is maybe saying, all right, he's talking about mindfulness, talking about meditative practices, talking about contemplative practices. So how do I get into this? The key is to find one that resonates with you. Now, I did say that, yoga and Hindu philosophy and Buddhist philosophy But I have contemplative practices in the title as well, because I also was in the CC Italy studying their types of meditative practices, which they call contemplation. And so it's called centering prayer or contemplative practice or Lectio Divina, in which they sit and they just think about and meditate what is called a verse or a line of scripture. And so what I want people to know across the board is when we talk about meditation and mindfulness, it's not just some Eastern thing. There are ways to practice in other faiths as well. And if you don't come out of any faith whatsoever, if you just have some sort of secular scientific mind, then there are methods for you too.
Yes. Yeah.
And so the purpose is to find something that resonates with your particular personality. And so there are methods where you just sit and observe and watch your body breathe. You don't even need to control it or regulate it. You just sort of observe it and watch how it does it. And, you know, what's going to happen is your mind's going to wander, but you just keep coming back to that sensation of the breath over and over and over again. But for some people, you know, that's their mind sitting there watching the breath. They see how chaotic it is, how many thoughts they're having, and it becomes a very like anxious thing. They become nervous, like, oh my God, my mind is so chaotic. It's jumping all over the place. After every breath, my mind is off on another thought. So somebody like that, maybe you look into a visualization technique or a sound meditation where you're sitting there and just listening to maybe singing bowls or some instruments being played, and you just focus on that. For some people, that does help because it's like they're listening to a song. And so they're just sitting there sort of like listening to maybe like a classical piece. It's usually not music that they're listening to, but there are meditative, you know, music and meditative artists out there that do create albums of meditation music that might be more song-like. But you just got to find something that's resonates with your particular personality. And then once you do that, you just got to try to make that a part of your regular routine. So when you said, how does that look? There is no perfect way it looks. For everybody, that's going to be different. Now, ideally, some people will say that, or have heard, you should meditate for about 20 to 30 minutes a day. You should try these practices for 20 to 30 minutes a day. And that is true, but maybe not when you're just first starting out. Because for some people, that can be so long and so frustrating and so difficult that they do it for a couple of days, couple of weeks, maybe even a month. And they're like, oh God, this is so hard to do, that they just get so frustrated with the practice. They throw their hands up and they're like, I tried it, but this isn't for me. But what you really needed to do in that case was sort of like just dip your toe in it and maybe just start with like 2 to 3 minutes of just sitting and trying your practice. And just see how that feels for you. And it's not like a sprint that you need to get to 20 to 30 minutes in a week or a month, but build yourself up slowly. And I promise you that if you try maybe just 60 seconds or, you know, 3 minutes of practice, that after some time of doing that for a while, you're going to start to, you know, cultivate a little bit of a muscle that learns how to stay a little bit more centered, a little bit more focused, a little bit more present. And those 3 minutes are going to begin to feel a little bit more enjoyable to you. You're going to feel a little bit of a sense of a relaxation and calm that on its own, those 3 minutes will then go to like maybe 10 minutes. And then those 10 minutes will eventually go to 20 minutes. But I often recommend as a teacher of the practice to let it evolve for you as you feel it comfortable. You know, not just stoically force yourself to sit there for 30 minutes from the get-go, because for some people that really can be a very, very difficult thing. And sometimes things come up for us in our practice. We begin to see things that are inside that also can begin to become uncomfortable. And so rather than say, oh, just stoically force yourself to sit through that discomfort, it might be better to just treat it with a little bit of compassion and say, oh, this, I didn't recognize that this was coming. And maybe just step away at that moment in time and then come back and try to sit again when you're ready. So the practice, how it looks for each individual is individual, because no one meditated with your mind before, no one's meditated with your body before. But what I do always recommend, and when people do come to me for maybe private instructions, is sometimes we work with a practice for a couple of weeks to maybe a month. And they say, well, all right, I get it, but what else could we try? And then we try some other methods that are out there until they go, oh, wow, I really like this one. I see. And then we're able to find for them the method that they really like. for people that do have a very deep spiritual disposition, sometimes sitting and contemplating a verse of scripture for them is just so enjoyable, and really trying to just sit with that. But for some people, just sitting and, like I said, maybe hearing a sound or doing a mantra, or doing a visualization technique for them is better. So your practice should be one you find resonates with your type of mind and your type of personality, and then slowly build up from there.
I love that. I had no idea there were that many different methods. So that's interesting.
Yeah.
Right. And don't you think that when somebody, they start slow and try different ones and find what works for you, don't you agree that they'll get to a point where they almost don't feel good if they don't do it?
Oh, absolutely. Right. That was like the biggest surprise to me, is eventually after I, would stop meditating, or I miss a day here or there, I could sense my day was like a little bit off, a little bit different. Things would, affect me a little bit different than if I started my day getting centered, and so, yeah. And you do begin to miss it when you really start to develop that. But you need to really allow these practices to become consistent in your life if you are looking to get the deeper benefits out of the practice. It needs the little thing I often say is that it needs to become as regular as brushing your teeth or taking a shower, because that's really when they begin to unfold for you. If you just meditate today and then you meditate a month from now and then you sit again like 3 months later, it's not really going to do anything for you. You're developing a muscle when you really do work these practices on a more consistent basis.
Right. So you're working out your mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
Another thing. Yeah. So people are going to get to a point where they like what you said. They're going to give it a try. It sounds like the way you've described it, it's something that they can do. They're going to get to a point where they're doing it daily. It's getting a little easier. They're starting to feel better. But I think it's also important for people to understand that the mind can change, right? Yeah. We're actually developing that muscle, and we're developing a mindset. We're developing new connections in the mind that are literally going to transform life, transform the way we see life. And I mean, it's not just some kind of, out there kind of idea. Like, it works, you guys. And, do what Anthony says. It's amazing.
Absolutely. There's a whole term, which you're probably well aware of, called neuroplasticity, which means the mind can literally change itself and create new neurological connections that weren't there before, all the time. So, I mean, this is something that's very fascinating, because there's also a very common phrase in neurology, which is that neurons that fire together wire together. And so what happens with that is that means that new highways or streets are literally like set up for these electrical impulses to begin to pass through and move. And it can create totally new ways that the mind begins to perceive and see things. And we can develop areas of the brain that make us more compassionate, make us more positive in our outlook, all of this sort of stuff. The mind can literally change itself. And there's a very... It is. And there's a very well-known quote by Albert Einstein, who says that there's two ways we can live in this world. We can either live as if nothing is a miracle, or we can live as if everything is a miracle. And I believe that we can literally change our mindset through trying to live as if everything is a miracle, that we begin to see a miraculous world around us, because now those new neurons are set up in that way to begin to see that.
Absolutely. That's the reticular activating system too, isn't it? You see what you're looking for, you start to see. So it literally does. We've got the epigenetics. You can change your body, the neuroplasticity, the reticular activating system, so many great things for people who like the science part of it. I mean, it's amazing how transforming this simple practice can be.
Yes, absolutely.
So I love your talk. I've learned so much. I love it. I want to ask, I always ask and unfortunately we're having to wind down. I hate it, but toward the end, and I think you've already answered. I ask if each of the experts, if there's a simple action step that you can leave people with, just one simple thing that they can do at home that will just help them get started.
Sure. Well, an action step is in finding your method today is much easier. You don't have to run off to, like India, lock yourself in a monastery or at the top of the Himalayas.
That sounds wonderful.
It is wonderful. But You can literally go on like YouTube or Google search or something, different methods of meditation, and then a bunch will come up for you, and then maybe just try it for a couple of weeks. Don't just try for like 3 days, but give yourself like, 3 weeks to a month of practice with the method before you try maybe a different one, and then compare how one felt for you compared to the other. And those are just little simple things that you can do now to maybe find a method that resonates with your particular personality. But if you are feeling stressed in this world right now, and you want to try something else you could do, is there is a simple little technique that all you need to do is try it for like 3 minutes to 5 minutes, is just breathe in for a particular count. We all have different lung capacities, so it doesn't matter what it is. It could be 3 breaths, 4 breaths, or 5 breaths. But breathe out, exhale out at like 2 to 3 times longer. So if you breathe in for 3, exhale out for like 6 to 9. And what happens is it begins to short circuit our nervous system out of the sympathetic, or your stress. Your sympathetic is an easy way to remember your stress system, into the parasympathetic, which is your rest and digest or relaxation part of your nervous system. And a longer exhale has been shown to short circuit your nervous system into moving out of the sympathetic and into the parasympathetic. So for those that might be feeling a lot of stress right now in their lives, just take 3 to 5 minutes to just try doing that and see if it has an effect for you.
Nice. I love that. That's definitely something easy and free. People can do at home and give it a try. And also, when you were saying to Google or, look for different types of practices that they might try, and maybe they spend a few days on this one or a week on that one, even while they're searching, and even if that's not the one that they end up with, they're still going to be getting benefit all along the way.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So that's beautiful.
Yeah.
I love it. I love your talk. This has been so much fun and so good. And I want you to, Anthony has a gift for you guys. I'm going to put his title up and let him tell you what the gift is.
Sure. It's a free gift. It's a free ebook. It's just a very foundational book to help people get started in these practices, help them learn really with, being mindful in life is all about, learning the art of presence, as I call it, being present to the moment, so we could see the things that life is presenting to us and then learn how to respond wisely. It teaches them how to get started in a basic meditation practice. And it also includes a couple of guided meditations from me as well, so that when they're trying to sit and practice, they have someone guiding them.
That's perfect. I love that. That was actually a question I was going to ask you about whether or not you recommended guided meditations for people starting out. So that's perfect. Anthony, thank you so much. Oh, and just so everyone knows, there'll be a link below the video to access that amazing free gift. It's very generous of you. And thank you so much for giving your time and your knowledge to everyone. I appreciate you so much. And I hope that you have a great day. We'll stay in touch.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.